Hi, my name is Nadia Berchtenbreiter. I'm from Ghana in Germany, and I'm currently in Seoul studying international studies in Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. Before I came to Korea, of course, I did a lot of research with the universities that had my major because it's not a very common major in international studies, especially in, let's say, in Asia. So my first priority was definitely checking if the universities here had my major. And after finding the major, I guess it was also about the international body that they had. Like, did they represent their international students well, and stuff like also the kind of extracurricular activities they offer for the students in the university. But even before I got to all that phase, the major reason why I came here was because I was interested in the language. My passion for Korea first started off with the language, and through the language, I did a lot of research about the country, and I found myself really interested in the history of South Korea, because back home, we didn't study much about Asian history. It was mostly Western, European history, African history. So there was barely anything to do with Asian studies, and I was just very curious. So I guess that was also one of the reasons why I decided to venture in Asia to begin with. And of course, even before I came here, I not only did research about the living expenses and everything, but I also made sure to try to learn the language a bit so that I wouldn't be so lost when I get here. So for South Korea specifically, I think when it came to the study plan, a lot of the questions I noticed stemmed from the reason why you want to come to Korea. Your interest in coming to Korea, because Korea is not like a hotspot destination for a lot of students, especially back when I was coming to Korea. It wasn't yet a hotspot for a lot of students. Most students decide to go to maybe Europe or America or Canada. So a lot of the questions that they had was definitely based on your interest in coming to Korea and what potential do you have to bring to Korea, and sort of also what you're looking for in the future plan. So I guess for Korea, when you are writing a study plan, your passion has to show. The reason why you're coming here is very, very important, because also getting a visa to come to Korea is not easy when you're a student. So everything needs to be honest. They need to see honesty in your personal statement that you're actually really interested in coming to the country, learning the language, and also studying here. For the accommodation, I would say that was one of the hardest parts about coming here, because trying to look for accommodation when you're abroad, when you're not in the country, is very, very hard. And unfortunately, when I first came here, I joined the language program first because I wanted to at least understand survival Korean before I move into actual university work. But the issue is, in the university that I was doing the language program, they didn't offer dormitory for language students, because Seoul is a very big city. A lot of people live here. The population here is really huge and dense. So it's very hard to find accommodation, especially in the dormitory, because most of them are taken. So when I came here, I had to find my own space to live. The dormitory were full. They weren't given access to language students. So I just did a lot of online research. I think that was the only way I could find. And luckily, I was able to find something on Google about something called Goshiwon. So Goshiwon is basically small study rooms. They are very tiny, like what a lot of people would hear about housing in, let's say, East Asia. They're really tiny spaces, much tinier than a dorm, but because that was the only option I had to stick with it. But yeah, there's definitely apps out there and websites on Google to help people find these rooms in the Goshiwon, depending on the area of Seoul you want to live. So that was what I had to stick with when I first came here. For sure, my first worry was the language. It's always worrying when you move to a country where the language is completely different from what you know. And as I mentioned, I did study the basics, but the basics can only take you so far. So I was extremely worried about language barrier and also getting lost, because it's your first time, you don't really know anyone in the country, so getting lost is it's very common. But luckily, I noticed that the thing about Koreans is that they are very helpful. If they see that you're a foreigner and you're lost or you're looking around hopelessly, some of them might actually come up to you and ask you, are you lost? Do you need help? So I had this a lot of the time when I had an issue and I couldn't find where I was going. Someone would come to me, or if I was desperate, I would also go to people. And I think what helped was that I always had a screenshot of the location that I needed to go to. So, and also in Korean, make sure that the location that you're going to, the address is also in Korean, so that it's easier for them to see and help you get there. Another thing I would give to foreigners who are coming to Korea is that don't use Google Maps here. Google Maps here will get you lost. I know it's very common for everyone around the world to use Google Maps, but trust me, Google Maps it's not very accurate in Korea. They have their own map apps called Kakao Map or Naver Map, and these are very accurate, and if you use them, you'll not get lost. These days they offer English options, so you can also write the address in English, but of course I would recommend trying to copy and paste the address in Korean. And another advice I would give, which I will always give to people traveling to a country that they're going to live for a while, is learn the basics of the language. At least if you can't learn everything on your own and you find it hard, try to learn the alphabet. You'll be surprised with how far that would take you. And in the case of Korean, the Korean alphabet is actually not that difficult. It's not a lot, and it's also not difficult. You can study it within 2 hours, and it really would help you, because there were lots of cases where I would go out to a restaurant, and because I studied the alphabet, I was able to read the menu, and some of the words, they will be written in instead of saying ham in English, they'll say hem, or burger, they'll say burger. So if you can read the alphabet, you're able to catch these and able to understand, oh, okay, maybe this is cheeseburger, this is that. So it's very important that you can read the alphabet, because it also helps you with directions. And I would say my last advice is just be open-minded. Be open-minded about coming to East Asia, because in a lot of East Asian countries like Korea, Japan, it's still very homogeneous. Although there are foreigners here, there's not a lot of foreigners, so they are also not very used to having seeing different types of foreigners, and also depending on the area you are. If you're in Seoul, then it's fine because it's a big city. A lot of tourists come here, so they're very used to it. But let's say if you're going to a smaller city or even a village, they're not used to seeing foreigners, so maybe people might stare at you a bit longer than you expect. But try to understand that they're just curious about you. You're curious about where you're from, and a lot of times you find Koreans coming up to you and asking, where are you from? Because they're curious. So please be open-minded and understand that depending on where you are, people would be more curious about you. So try not to feel very insecure when you come here and you find people staring at you. It's just out of curiosity. My first 2 weeks here, I would say, was very challenging. So I came to Korea in the dead of winter. I came to Korea at the end of December. I remember I landed in Korea on the 29th of December. So that means I spent New Year's alone and New Year's Eve alone. So that was a bit lonely, because my family would call me and they would be having a nice feast at home, and I was just alone in my room. I didn't really know any friends, so it felt a bit lonely because of the time that I came to Korea. And the issue was also, it was very cold, because moving from a very hot and humid country all of a sudden to the dead of winter in another country, I think it was a huge shock for my body. So it was also hard for me to go out. So I would just stay in with my jackets and blankets because I'm not used to winter. So that was definitely a struggle. And I don't know how I could prepare for that because I tried to get winter clothes in Ghana, but I mean, of course, there's not going to be there's not going to be much variety because no one would really use it in Ghana. So I think that was definitely the struggle for the first 2 weeks, but it was fun at the same time because it's just the whole adventure, soaking everything in, and it's definitely one of those things that happens when you travel alone and you don't have any friends in the country. And for university, I would say what I should have done before I entered university was probably prepare myself for how competitive it is in this country. Korea is very, very, very competitive, and they have their grading system is also very strict and harsh. So I think I should have prepared myself a bit more concerning what I was going to put myself through. It's very competitive, so you have to always be on the go. There's not really much time for you to like relax because someone is doing it better. So how can you compete with that person? So I think that was stressful. So maybe finding ways to relax and de-stress should have also been something I should have prioritized before coming into university. My first time experience during class, it was fun, I would say, because I got to meet so many people. And I think one of the things that shocked me was how many foreigners were in my department. I think for my department, it is about 70% foreigners and maybe 30% Koreans. So I was very, very shocked with the amount of foreigners I was surrounded with in my department, and also the countries they were from. I met so many people from all over the world and I listened to their stories. And during class, like when the teachers would teach, there's always new perspective to things. And I think that was very interesting for me to be in class. And also apart from that, the professors here also are very understanding, especially when you're a foreigner, because they know you're far away from home. You're now learning the language. So during the first semester, they're a bit chill with you because they know that you're going through a lot in terms of getting used to the environment, the language, and also the whole class system. So I would say the first semester was a struggle, but it was fun. It was more fun getting used to everyone, knowing people. So I enjoyed my first semester. The lecturers, surprisingly, I wasn't really expecting too much because maybe I'm in a new country, and in a new education system. So I guess I wasn't really expecting anything high, although I tried to be very neutral. But of course, I was blown away because some of the experiences they had, when my professors talked, they were like, oh, I went to Cambridge University, I went to Harvard, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of Korean professors that have studied in the US or in the UK. So it was a big shock for me that a lot of them went abroad to study. So actually a lot of times they understood what it's like to be a foreign student. Yeah, they understood what it felt to be an international student. So I guess that's how they were also able to sympathize with us, especially specifically for my major. I guess because it's the international studies major, a lot of the professors also have that international experience studying abroad. So I'd say that's also one of the rewarding thing about studying my major. You have teachers that have studied in so many different countries and they bring to you their experience and their knowledge, and it's amazing. One of the big thing I'd say every international student should take advantage of in Korea, studying in Korea, is the university festivals. So Korea has this culture that every semester there's huge university festivals, but because of Corona, things kind of stopped. But back then there'll be huge university festivals where we'd have K-pop artists even come to each school to perform. and there'll be students performing and also clubs that have their own, showing their own talents. So I would say definitely dive yourself in going to school festivals, not only your school festivals, but other school festivals. The thing about Korea is that school festivals are free to enter. So you can go to another school festival and enjoy the environments there. So school festival, if that comes back. But apart from that, I'll say also joining in groups. When I say groups, I mean like international buddy group. For my school, we have 2 international buddy group, and they try to help international students. And I would say it's very good to participate in those things, because the longer you stay in the school, of course, you know more. So if you're able to participate in these groups, you're also able to help other foreign students who are coming into the school. And also, depending on it, like you might also get some scholarship opportunities from your school if you participate in these international groups in school that help students. So I'd say join on that. And apart from school life, also venture out. There's so much to do in Korea. I know most of us come abroad to study and our sole focus is studying, but you also have to know your environments you're in. You have to be able to learn the language, and one of the best ways in learning the language is communicating with the people around you. And there's so many ways, like in Facebook you find groups, exchange groups, and you can go on those, and that's how you can even also make long-term Korean friends, because it can be a bit hard to make Korean friends, especially when there's the language barrier. But putting yourself out there in these groups would definitely help you. So I would say enjoy your university life. Of course, study, but you should also have fun too. So that's it's just you gain more experience all around. This is an interesting question. So why is it important to go to university in the first place? For me personally, I would say one thing I really enjoyed about being in university, even though it can be very hard sometimes, you have lots of assignments to do, you have projects, you might have your thesis at the end of the program. I would say the people and the professors that you meet. There are some classes that I've been to, and you hear the professors talk and you listen to other people's experience, and I feel like those are knowledge that you just don't get easily. Yes, you can go on Google to Google something, but the experience of your professor, they have first-hand experience. And some of them work in the field, so they know directly what is required to, let's say, work or just be out there in the world. So I think for me, it was definitely listening to other people's perspective on things, especially for my major, international studies, is very important. Knowing about other cultures, and I don't think I would have been able to learn about so many other cultures if I wasn't put in this situation. Because as I said, I met people from so many other, even countries that I didn't even know existed. So for me, it was definitely, I think university is not only a place where you go to gather knowledge, but also learn different perspective and different lifestyle. And that's one of the most important things to me personally. My last advice is always be open-minded. Try to be adventurous too. Try to be adventurous, go out, work as much as you can, try different food. You'll be surprised that you might like some things that you never thought you would like. And whilst you are at it, you find out you also make a lot of friends. So I'll just say be out there. I know it can be hard maybe if you're shy or an introvert, but once in a while just step out there and you'll be surprised what the world has to offer to you. And you might even stumble upon people that could bring great opportunities to your life. So my advice is be open-minded and be adventurous.
Reach out to your life